Hello friends and family. Today's topic is a king wish he had the power to turn everything to gold, and it came true. Everything he touched turned to gold, but a problem was he couldn't eat anything because he turned his food into gold also. The king started to starve to death because of his power. Let's begin. You know, my dear, King Adrian mused to his queen, I wish I had the power to turn everything to gold. He spoke casually, his eyes glancing over the bustling market beyond their balcony. Her eyes grew wide, a spark of excitement lighting her features. Can you imagine? Our kingdom would be the richest in the land. Queen Alara responded with a laugh, not quite grasping the gravity of his words. The very next morning, as the royal couple descended the grand staircase for breakfast, King Adrian reached out to touch the intricate gold banister, and to his astonishment, it transformed beneath his fingertips. He stared in wonder as the metal grew soft and pliable, morphing into gleaming gold. It's real, he breathed, unable to tear his gaze away from the opulent sight. Your wish, Queen Alara gasped, her voice a mix of awe and trepidation. But how? I do not know, King Adrian murmured, the reality of his newfound power sinking in. He looked down at his hand, flexing his fingers. They remained flesh and bone, unchanged. But it seems that somehow my wish has been granted. The royal couple stepped into the grand hall for breakfast, where their usual spread of food and drink awaited them. The king reached for a plump grape, only to watch in horror as it shriveled to a golden nugget in his hand. His heart sank as he realized the implications of his gift. Alara, he choked out, I have turned my food to gold. Her eyes searched his face, understanding dawning as she picked up a piece of toast, which crumbled into golden flakes. This is a curse, not a blessing, she whispered. Panic began to set in as they realized the magnitude of their predicament. The king's power had transformed their sustenance into inedible treasures, leaving them to starve amidst a feast of gold. The royal court, witnessing the king's failure to eat, grew restless. Whispers of witchcraft and divine punishment spread like wildfire. The once cheerful atmosphere of the castle grew tense and oppressive. The king and queen retreated to their private chambers, desperation gnawing at their hearts. Days turned into weeks, and King Adrian grew weaker by the hour. His skin took on a sickly pallor, his eyes sunk into their sockets, and his once robust frame withered away. Queen Alara, refusing to leave his side, shared in his suffering, though her love for her people prevented her from using her power. In their desperation, the king and queen summoned the court's most revered magicians and sages, hoping for a solution. They tried potions, spells, and ancient rituals, but all attempts to reverse the golden touch ended in failure. The castle's storerooms grew heavy with gold as the king's power continued its relentless transformation of the kingdom's resources. The people of the land grew increasingly worried as their beloved rulers wasted away. The whispers grew louder, turning to accusations of greed and pride. The royal advisors, fearing revolt, urged the king to seek help from the gods. In a last-ditch effort, King Adrian and Queen Alara embarked on a pilgrimage to the sacred grove, where the ancient oracle dwelt. The journey was fraught with peril, but driven by desperation, they pressed on. Upon reaching the grove, the oracle spoke in a cryptic riddle. To break the curse of Midas, you must find the tear of Irene, a gem born of sorrow, and bathe in its waters. The tear of Irene was said to be hidden in the distant crystal caves, a place shrouded in legend and danger. With their spirits somewhat restored by the oracle's guidance, the king and queen set out on an arduous quest. their entourage reduced to a trusted few. The caves were treacherous, filled with labyrinthine passages that echoed with the whispers of lost souls and glittered with the cold light of crystalline formations. As they ventured deeper, the air grew thin and their torches flickered with the strain of the journey. They encountered creatures of myth and shadow, driven mad by the proximity to the fabled gem. The king's golden touch had become a burden, as even the simplest tasks, such as opening doors or climbing over rocks, were now fraught with the risk of turning them into impassable obstacles of gleaming gold. After weeks of hardship, they stumbled upon the chamber of the Tear of Irene. It lay nestled in a pool of crystal-clear water, its deep blue hue casting an eerie glow across the cavern walls. The sight of it brought tears to the king's eyes. "Could this be our salvation?" he whispered to his queen. With trembling hands, he reached for the gem, but it was not to be so easily claimed. The moment he touched the water's surface, a fierce guardian emerged from the shadows, a creature of living crystal, its eyes ablaze with the fire of 1,000 suns. The creature roared, the sound shaking the very ground beneath them, and the king's knights stepped forward, shields raised and swords drawn. The battle was fierce and swift, the clanging of steel against crystal resonating through the cavern. The king and queen watched in horror as their loyal men fell one by one, their weapons shattering against the guardian's impervious form. The creature's power seemed to grow with every blow it deflected, and hope dwindled like their dwindling strength. King Adrian knew he had to act. He stepped forward, his hand outstretched, and as the creature lunged, he touched it. Instantly, the beast froze, its body contorting into a statue of pure gold. The cave grew silent except for the echo of their labored breaths. The king had turned the guardian into a trophy of his own curse. They approached the pool with trepidation, the Tear of Irene seeming to pulse with a life of its own. As Adrian reached for the gem, a vision overcame him. The land, once fertile and bountiful, now barren and lifeless, the gold he had created worthless in the face of starvation. He understood the price of his greed and the sorrow that had borne this tear. With a heavy heart, he plucked the tear from the water. It felt cool and soothing against his skin, a stark contrast to the harsh reality of his power. He held it out to Elara, whose eyes were brimming with tears. "We must find a way to fix this," she whispered. They made their way back to the castle, the weight of their failure pressing down on them like a leaden cloak. The once bustling market was now a deserted wasteland of gold, the people having lost faith in their golden king. The castle gates stood open, a silent sentinel to their plight. The sages had warned that the tear's power could be volatile, and they feared the consequences of using it. In the royal chamber, the king and queen sat before a table laden with gold, their food, their furniture, their very lives transformed by the curse. They clasped hands, the Tear of Irene resting between them. "We must be brave," Elara murmured, her voice shaking. "We must save our people." King Adrian nodded solemnly. He knew the risk of using the tear. The legend spoke of its power to reverse any enchantment, but also of the heavy price it demanded. With a deep breath, he closed his eyes and made his wish: to return the gold to its original state, restoring their lives and the kingdom to normalcy. The tear began to pulse more rapidly, and the room grew cold. A sudden gust of wind whipped through the chamber, extinguishing the candles and sending golden leaves of food and furniture flying into the air. The king felt a sharp pain in his hand, as if the very essence of his curse was being ripped away. When the chaos subsided, the king and queen opened their eyes to find themselves in a room of familiar shapes and textures. The gold was gone, replaced by the warmth of wood, the comfort of fabric, and the scent of real food. They looked at each other, hope and relief flooding their features. Thank you for your time. God bless.